The millionaire regrets seeing a black homeless woman with baby and stunning eyes years later. Ethan Sterling, living the high life in his Manhattan penthouse, right? Sharp suits, sharper mind, the whole deal. But tonight, something was off. He's staring out at the city lights, champagne in hand, but it tasted like nothing. Earlier, some fancy pants charity gala. Fake smiles, forced small talk, the usual. Then, bam, a memory hits him like a ton of bricks. It was a Tuesday, just another day. Ethan, rushing to a make-or-break meeting, stuck at a red light on Bleecker Street. And there she was, a black woman, struggling with a busted stroller, huddled in the doorway of Leo's Deli, closed for renovation. That wasn't all. Eyes. Man, those eyes. Blue. Electric blue. She locked eyes with him, a silent plea, and that's when he recognized her. Sarah. His old housekeeper. Someone he was involved with, way back when. The light turned green. He floored it. Meeting to get to, deals to close, excuses to make. He'd help her later, he told himself. Lies. He never did. Now, years later, Sarah's face. Those desperate blue eyes, and the little boy she was holding tight, wouldn't let him go. The guest speaker at the gala, rambling about underprivileged kids. It just cranked. Up the guilt. Back at his place, news flash on his phone. Local woman found dead, infant son in custody. The photo was blurry, but those eyes, they were Sarah's. Cold dread punched him in the gut. He had to know. Keys, wallet. He bolted downtown, ignoring the late hour. He needed to find that kid, Alex, and figure out the connection. A connection that suddenly felt heavier than any multi-million-dollar deal. He pulled up near the precinct. Someone slipped out of the shadows. A guy in a fedora, face hidden, talking intense on his cell. He stopped, glanced at Ethan, and something, recognition, warning, flashed in his eyes before he hopped into a waiting black car. Ethan froze. Was it his imagination? Or was this way bigger than some tragic coincidence? Hey, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você tá aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários. De qual cidade você está assistindo? Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. Ethan froze. Was it his imagination, or was this way bigger than some tragic coincidence? He had to find Alex. He walked into the precinct, the stale smell of coffee and regret hitting him like a wall. A bored-looking cop, Officer Miller, sat behind the desk, chewing gum. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here about Sarah Johnson and her son." Miller's face didn't change. "Next of kin?" "No, just a friend." Ethan hated the lie. He was worse than a stranger. Miller sighed, pulling up a file on his computer. Rough case. Found her in her apartment. Overdose. Kids in foster care now, pending family contact. "Where is he?" "The boy, Alex." Ethan's voice was tighter than he wanted. Miller hesitated. "Look, pal, I can't just give out that information. Please, I want to help. I knew Sarah. Miller studied him, suspicion in his eyes. Then he shrugged. St. Vincent's Children's Home. But don't get his hopes up if you're not family. They're swamped. Ethan practically ran out of the precinct, adrenaline pumping. St. Vincent's wasn't far. He jumped back in his car, tires squealing as he sped through the city streets. St. Vincent's looked like a fortress. High fences, locked gates. He buzzed the intercom, his heart hammering. "May I help you?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "I'm here to see Alex Johnson. I'm an acquaintance of his mother." A pause. Just a moment. The gate buzzed open. Ethan walked inside, the weight of his guilt crushing him with every step. He was led to a small, sterile visiting room. A social worker, Miss Davis, sat at a table, her expression guarded. And then Alex walked in. He was small, maybe 5 years old, with messy brown hair, and those eyes, electric blue. They were Sarah's eyes, staring at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. Ethan knelt down, trying to smile. "Hey, Alex, my name is Ethan. I knew your mom." Alex didn't say anything, just stared. "She was a good person, Alex, a very good person." Ethan's voice cracked. He couldn't hold back the tears any longer. Miss Davis cleared her throat. "Mr. Sterling, is it? While we appreciate your concern, Alex is still very vulnerable. Perhaps this isn't the best time." "Just a minute," Ethan said, his eyes locked on Alex. "I want to help you, Alex. I promise. Whatever you need." Suddenly, Alex spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you know about the music box?" Ethan frowned. "Music box? No. What music box?" Alex's tiny hand reached into his pocket, pulling out a tarnished silver music box. It was intricately carved with tiny roses and vines. "Mommy said, never let anyone have it, ever." As Ethan took the music box, a cold dread washed over him. It was familiar, terribly familiar. He'd seen it before, years ago, in his grandmother's study, the music box she'd always told him never to touch, the one rumored to contain a secret. He flipped it open. The delicate melody of Claire de Lune filled the room. And then he saw it. Inside, nestled in the velvet lining, was a photograph. A faded black and white photo of his grandmother, standing next to a young woman, a black woman, her spitting image. And the woman in the photo was Sarah. But that wasn't the shocking part. Written on the back of the photo, in his grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, "My beloved daughter, Sarah, forever hidden, forever safe." Ethan staggered back, the music box clattering to the floor. Sarah was his cousin? Alex, his great-nephew? The truth slammed into him like a tidal wave, obliterating everything he thought he knew. Miss Davis gasped, rushing to Alex's side. Ethan couldn't breathe. His own family. The secret. His grandmother had guarded for decades. And Sarah, living in poverty, dying alone. Because of him. Because of his family's lies. He had to get out. He had to understand. He had to unravel this twisted web of deceit. He turned and fled, leaving Alex and Ms. Davis staring after him in stunned silence. The music box lay abandoned on the floor, its delicate melody echoing in the sterile room, a haunting reminder of the truth he had just uncovered. He drove like a madman back to his penthouse, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of guilt and horror. He had to find his grandmother's journals. They were locked away in the family vault. He needed answers, but as he reached for his phone to call his lawyer, he saw it. A single red dot, glowing menacingly on his chest. A laser sight. He barely had time to register the danger before the world exploded in a blinding flash of white. He barely had time to register the danger before the world exploded in a blinding flash of white. Silence. Then a ringing, a high-pitched whine that burrowed into his skull. He was on the floor, everything spinning. Smoke filled the air, stinging his eyes. What the? He tried to move, pain lancing through his shoulder. He looked down. Blood. His shirt was soaked. But he was alive? Barely. He scrambled for his phone, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. 911. He dialed, his voice a ragged whisper. Help. Penthouse. Shot. The operator's voice was calm, professional, but it sounded miles away. He gave his address, then the phone slipped from his numb fingers. He lay there, gasping for breath, waiting for the sirens, for the paramedics, for something, anything. Then he heard it. A creak. The elevator. Someone was coming. He tried to get up, to crawl away, but his body wouldn't obey. He was trapped. The elevator doors opened. Not paramedics, not cops, the guy in the fedora. He stepped out, slow and deliberate, the fedora casting his face in shadow. He held a gun, silenced. Ethan stared up at him, fear clamping down on his throat. Why? He croaked. Who are you? The guy didn't answer. He just raised the gun. Wait! Ethan shouted, desperation flooding him. Alex, the boy, let me help him. The guy paused, his eyes glinting in the dim light. You can't help anyone. His voice was low, gravelly. You're too close to the truth. He took another step forward. Then, a voice boomed from behind him. Drop it, now! The guy whirled around, startled. Standing in the doorway, gun drawn, was Officer Miller, the bored-looking cop from the precinct. Miller? What the hell? The fedora guy sputtered. I said drop it! Miller repeated, his voice hard. I've been tailing you since you left the precinct. Figured you were up to no good. The fedora guy hesitated. Then a sneer twisted his lips. You're out of your league, copper. He fired. Miller ducked, the bullet whizzing past his head. He returned fire. 2 quick shots. The fedora guy stumbled, clutching his chest. He gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed to the floor. Silence. Miller stood there, breathing heavily, gun still raised. He looked down at the fallen figure, then back at Ethan. You okay, Sterling? Ethan just stared, his mind reeling. Officer Miller, a hero? What was going on? Miller holstered his weapon and walked over to Ethan, kneeling beside him. Let's get you some help. As Miller reached for his phone, Ethan noticed something glittering on Miller's wrist. A silver bracelet, intricately carved with tiny roses and vines. The music box. Ethan grabbed Miller's arm, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injuries. Where did you get that? He demanded, his voice hoarse. Miller's face went blank. He yanked his arm away, his eyes suddenly cold. "What are you talking about?" But Ethan knew. He knew. Miller wasn't a hero. He was the guy in the fedora's backup. He was in on it. He was Sarah's killer. He was about to die. He was about to die. Ethan stared into Miller's cold eyes. He saw no remorse, only calculation. This wasn't some rogue cop gone bad. This was planned, orchestrated. "The music box," Ethan rasped. "It's proof." Miller smirked. "Proof of what? A trinket? Sentimentality? Nobody will believe you, Sterling. You're a drunk, a philanderer, and now a victim of a tragic home invasion." He raised his gun. Ethan closed his eyes, bracing for the end. Then a voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear. "Freeze, Miller! Police!" It was a woman's voice, and it sounded familiar. Ethan opened his eyes. Standing in the doorway, behind Miller, was Sarah. But it wasn't Sarah. Not exactly. This woman was younger, stronger, more confident. She held a gun steady, pointed directly at Miller's head. "Drop the weapon, Miller, now!" she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. Miller froze, his face a mask of disbelief. "Agent Carter? What the hell is going on?" Agent Carter. The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sarah hadn't been a housekeeper. She'd been an agent? And this woman— "You're not Sarah," Ethan breathed, confusion swirling in his brain. "Who are you?" The woman didn't take her eyes off Miller. "Sarah was my sister. And you, Mr. Sterling, are about to get a crash course in the Sterling family secrets." Miller, realizing he was cornered, made a desperate move. He lunged at Agent Carter, knocking her off balance. The gun flew from her hand, clattering across the floor. Ethan watched in horror as they grappled, a brutal, silent struggle for survival. He tried to move to help, but his body wouldn't respond. Suddenly, Miller broke free. He grabbed the gun, spinning around to face Agent Carter. "This is over," he snarled. But before he could fire, a figure emerged from the shadows. A small, wiry figure. Alex. He'd followed them. He'd seen everything. With a primal scream, Alex launched himself at Miller, sinking his teeth into the man's leg. Miller roared in pain, dropping the gun. He kicked Alex away, sending the boy flying across the room. Agent Carter seized the opportunity. She tackled Miller, pinning him to the ground. She grabbed his gun and pointed it at his head. "This is for my sister," she hissed. But she didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she handcuffed him. "You're under arrest, Miller, for murder, conspiracy, and a whole lot more." She turned to Ethan, her expression softening slightly. "We need to get you to a hospital, and then we need to talk about Sarah, about your family, about everything." She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. Then she looked at Alex, who was huddled in a corner, crying. "Come here, sweetie," she said gently. "It's okay now. You're safe." Alex hesitated, then ran to her, burying his face in her leg. Ethan stared at them, his mind reeling. He was alive, but everything he thought he knew was a lie. Sarah was an agent. Alex had just saved their lives. And this woman, Sarah's sister, knew everything. As they waited for the paramedics, Agent Carter turned to Ethan, her eyes hard. "There's something you need to know, Mr. Sterling. Something about your grandmother. She wasn't just hiding Sarah. She was protecting her from someone. Someone very powerful. Someone in your own family." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And that person is still out there. And that person is still out there." The paramedics arrived, sirens screaming through the Manhattan night. Chaos erupted. Flashing lights shouted orders, the acrid smell of antiseptic. They loaded Ethan onto a stretcher, Agent Carter right beside him, her face a mix of concern and grim determination. Alex clung to her hand, his blue eyes wide with trauma. "I'll be okay," Ethan mumbled, his voice raspy. "Take care of him, please." Carter squeezed his hand. "I will. You just focus on getting better. This isn't over, Ethan. Not by a long shot." The ambulance doors slammed shut. As they sped away, Ethan caught a glimpse of Carter standing on the sidewalk, Alex nestled in her arms. He closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him under. He woke up in a sterile hospital room, IVs dripping into his arm. The city lights, usually a comfort, now felt like a mocking reminder of his opulent life, a life built on lies and secrets. A nurse bustled in, checking his vitals. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Sterling. A few inches to the left." He didn't need the lecture. He knew how close he'd come. Later that day, Agent Carter arrived, looking exhausted but resolute. She pulled up a chair, her eyes serious. "We found something at your penthouse," she said, her voice low. "Something you need to see." She slid a photo across the table. It was a picture of his grandmother, a younger version, elegant and regal, standing next to a man, a black man. His grandfather? "Who is that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That, Mr. Sterling, is Frederick Douglass," Carter said, her voice flat. "Your grandmother had an affair with him. Sarah was their child." Ethan stared at the photo, his world tilting on its axis. Frederick Douglass? The abolitionist? His grandmother? It was impossible, unthinkable. "But the family," he stammered, "they would never." "They did," Carter said, her eyes unwavering. "They buried it. They paid people off. They silenced anyone who knew the truth. Your grandmother wanted to protect Sarah from the racism of the time, but it spiraled out of control." He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. His family, slave owners, and his grandmother defying them all, falling in love with a man who fought for freedom. "But who wanted Sarah dead?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why now?" Carter leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Because Sarah had something they wanted, something that could destroy them all." She paused, letting her words sink in. "She had proof that your great-grandfather didn't just own slaves. He traded them. And not just any slaves. He traded in children. Children he fathered with his slaves." Ethan gasped. The Sterling fortune, built on the backs of enslaved children, his ancestors, monsters. "There's more," Carter continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Your grandfather. He continued the practice. He had children with his maids, sold them off. It's all documented in a hidden ledger. Sarah had it, and now someone thinks you do." Suddenly, the door burst open. A man in a suit rushed in, his face pale. "Ethan, thank God you're alive." It was his cousin, Charles, the one who was supposed to inherit the sterling fortune, the one who always seemed so perfect. "Charles?" Ethan said, confusion clouding his mind. "What are you doing here?" Charles rushed to his bedside, grabbing his hand. "I heard what happened. I was so worried. Who would do such a thing?" He looked at Carter, his eyes narrowing. "Who's this?" "This is Agent Carter," Ethan said, his voice wary. "She's helping me find out who tried to kill me." Charles' smile faltered. "Oh, well, I'm sure it was just some random act of violence. Manhattan's not what it used to be." He squeezed Ethan's hand again, his grip surprisingly tight. "You just focus on getting better, okay? I'll take care of everything." As Charles turned to leave, Ethan saw it. A fleeting flicker of something in his eyes. A glint of fear, or was it something else? He looked at Carter, his eyes pleading. She nodded almost imperceptibly. She saw it too. As Charles walked towards the door, he paused, turning back to face Ethan. "Oh, and Ethan," he said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "I almost forgot. I found something of yours at the penthouse. I thought you might want it back." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and silver. A music box. Clair de Lune filled the room. And then Charles did something that made Ethan's blood run cold. He winked. Clair de Lune filled the room. And then Charles did something that made Ethan's blood run cold. He winked. Ethan felt a jolt, a sickening realization spreading through him. Charles. It all clicked into place. The music box, the feigned concern, the too perfect alibi. But why? You tried to kill me," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Charles chuckled, a low, chilling sound. "Tried? Oh, Ethan, I succeeded. You're not as sharp as you think you are." He pulled a syringe from his pocket. It was filled with a clear liquid. "This," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice, "is untraceable. It'll look like your heart just gave out. Stress, you know. All those family secrets." Agent Carter tensed, ready to react. But Charles held up a hand. "Don't even think about it, Agent Carter. I have friends here. They'll be here any minute. And they're not as forgiving as I am." Ethan watched, paralyzed, as Charles approached. This was it. The end. All the money, all the power, all the secrets. It meant nothing. Then a voice shattered the tension. "Put the syringe down, Charles." Everyone froze. Standing in the doorway was Eleanor Sterling, Ethan's grandmother, the matriarch, the one who knew everything. She looked frail, almost ghostly, but her eyes burned with a fierce intensity. "Grandmother?" Ethan gasped. "What?" Eleanor ignored him, her gaze fixed on Charles. "You've gone too far, Charles. This ends now." Charles scoffed. "Eleanor? What are you doing here? You should be resting." "Besides," he added, gesturing towards Ethan with the syringe, "this is a family matter." Eleanor took a step forward, her hand trembling slightly. "This family has had enough secrets, enough lies. I won't let you add another one to the pile." "You can't stop me, Eleanor," Charles sneered. "I'm doing what has to be done, for the family." He lunged at Ethan, syringe raised. But before he could reach him, Eleanor moved with a speed that belied her age. She grabbed a metal water pitcher from the bedside table and slammed it into the back of Charles' head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Silence. Ethan stared at his grandmother, his mouth agape. She'd just knocked out Charles with a water pitcher. Grandmother, he stammered. How? Eleanor turned to him, her eyes filled with a lifetime of regret. There's so much you don't know, Ethan. So much I've kept hidden. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. Charles, he's not who you think he is. He's not a Sterling. She paused, her eyes darting around the room, as if afraid someone was listening. He's Frederick Douglass's son. The room spun. Everything Ethan thought he knew, shattered. Charles, the perfect privileged heir. The son of the man his grandmother had betrayed her family for. But how? Ethan whispered, his mind reeling. After I left Frederick, I discovered I was pregnant, Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. My family would have disowned me, so I gave the baby up for adoption. I thought I was protecting him. She looked down at Charles's unconscious form, her face etched with pain. But he found me, years ago. He was filled with anger, with resentment. He wanted revenge. He wanted the Sterling fortune. And I was too weak to stop him. Agent Carter stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. So you knew all along? You knew Charles was trying to kill Ethan? Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. I tried to warn Ethan. I left him clues. But Charles, he always seemed to be one step ahead. She looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I've made so many mistakes, but I swear, I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Suddenly, the door to the hospital room burst open again. This time, it was Alex. He ran to Ethan's side, his blue eyes wide with fear. Are you okay? He asked, his voice trembling. Ethan reached out and hugged him tightly. I'm okay, Alex. Thanks to you. He looked at Eleanor, at Agent Carter, at the unconscious Charles on the floor. His family, his history, a web of lies, secrets, and betrayal that stretched back generations. But as he held Alex close, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let it destroy him. He wasn't going to let it destroy Alex. It's not over, he said, his voice firm. Not by a long shot. We're going to find out the truth, all of it, and we're going to make sure justice is served, no matter what it takes. He looked at his grandmother, his eyes filled with a newfound determination. And grandmother, he said, his voice barely a whisper, there's something you haven't told us about Frederick Douglass's death. And grandmother, he said, his voice barely a whisper, there's something you haven't told us about Frederick Douglass's death. Eleanor flinched. A chill swept through the room, silencing even the beeping monitors. It was like everyone knew this was coming, this secret. Ethan, please, she rasped, her eyes pleading. Leave it alone. No, he said, his voice stronger now. He was your love, the father of Charles. What happened to him, grandmother? Tell us the truth. Agent Carter moved closer, her hand instinctively going to her holster. Alex clung to Ethan's side, his small body trembling. Eleanor closed her eyes, a tear escaping and tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Frederick, he was murdered. A collective gasp filled the room. Murdered? Frederick Douglass? My family. They couldn't stand that I'd run off with him. A black man. It was an embarrassment. A disgrace. They sent people. She shuddered, her voice cracking. They made it look like an accident. A stroke. But I knew. I always knew. Ethan stared at her, disbelief warring with a growing sense of horror. His family, capable of such darkness? And you? You kept this secret all these years? He asked, his voice laced with anger. You let his killer walk free? Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I was afraid. They threatened me. Threatened to kill Charles before he was even born. I had to protect him, even though... Her voice trailed off. Even though he was plotting to kill me? Ethan finished, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. The monitor next to his bed beeped erratically. Agent Carter placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm. Ethan, calm down. You need to rest. He ignored her, his gaze fixed on his grandmother. Who killed him, grandmother? Tell me who killed Frederick Douglass. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes filled with fear. I can't say. They're still out there. Powerful people. They'll kill us all. No, Ethan said, his voice rising. I'm done with the secrets. I'm done with the lies. Tell me the truth, grandmother. Tell me everything. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. A collective gasp filled the air. The monitors flatlined. The air grew cold. Agent Carter swore under her breath, pulling out her gun. What the hell? Then, a voice, low, raspy, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. You seek the truth? You desire to know the secrets of the past? Be careful what you wish for. The temperature plummeted. Ethan felt a presence, something unseen, something malevolent. Eleanor began to scream, her eyes wide with terror. He's here! He's here! He's come for me! Then something shifted. The air shimmered, and standing in the middle of the room was Frederick Douglass. But not as he'd ever been pictured. This Frederick Douglass was distorted, twisted. His eyes burned with a cold blue light. His skin was translucent, almost ghostly. Eleanor, he rasped, his voice a horrifying echo. You betrayed me. You kept my secret, and now you will pay the price. He reached out a spectral hand towards Eleanor, and as his fingers brushed her skin, she let out a final blood-curdling scream. Her body convulsed, then went still. Her eyes glazed over. She was gone, dead. Ethan stared in horror. A ghost? Frederick Douglass back from the dead? Then the spectral figure turned towards Ethan. His eyes, those burning blue eyes, locked onto his. You are the blood of my betrayer, he hissed, his voice filled with hatred. But you also carry my blood. I will give you a choice. Join me, or suffer the same fate as your grandmother. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Join him? What was he talking about? I don't understand, he stammered, his voice trembling. The spectral figure smiled, a horrifying, grotesque expression. You will, and then the world went black. But as Ethan lost consciousness, he heard one final whisper, a voice that chilled him to the very core. I am your father, Ethan. I am your father, Ethan. The world dissolved, colors swirled, then nothing, black, empty. Then a flash. He was standing in a field, a cotton field, under a brutal sun. Slaves toiled, their bodies slick with sweat. He saw a young black woman, her face etched with sadness. She was beautiful and pregnant. He knew. He just knew. He stumbled forward, reaching for her. "Sarah," he whispered. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a pain that cut him to the core. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice barely audible. "Go back. You can't change what's coming." Suddenly, a whip cracked. A white man, his face contorted with rage, strode towards them. "Get back to work, wench!" he roared. Ethan lunged, trying to protect Sarah, but his hands passed right through the man. He was a ghost, a spectator in his own nightmare. The white man grabbed Sarah, shoving her to the ground. He raised the whip again. Ethan screamed, his voice lost in the wind. He woke up gasping for air, sweat-soaked and shivering. He was back in the hospital room. Empty. Eleanor, gone. Frederick Douglass, gone. Charles still unconscious on the floor. Agent Carter was gone too. He sat up, ignoring the pain searing through his body. Something had changed. He could feel it. Something inside him. He looked down at his hands. They trembled. But there was something else there too. A strength. A knowing. He knew what he had to do. He ripped the IVs from his arm, ignoring the protests of the nurse who rushed in. "I have to go," he said, his voice firm. "I have to." "Stop him." "Stop who?" "Mr. Sterling, you're in no condition." He pushed past her, running out of the hospital. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to get away. He hailed a cab, barking out an address that had been buried in his memory for years, an address his grandmother had whispered to him on her deathbed just before him. The spectral Douglass, the Sterling family estate. As the cab sped through the city streets, Ethan's mind raced. Frederick Douglass was his father? Impossible! Yet he felt it. The connection, the blood, and that vision, the cotton field, Sarah, the whip. He closed his eyes, trying to block it out. But it was no use. It was all flooding back now. The secrets, the lies, the betrayals. The cab pulled up to the gates of the estate. He paid the driver, his hands shaking. He walked towards the gates, his heart pounding in his chest. They swung open. He walked up the long, winding driveway, the sprawling mansion looming before him like a monstrous shadow. The air was thick with the scent of old money and decay. He pushed open the front door, stepping into a cavernous foyer. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the windows. The silence was deafening. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing through the house. "Is anyone here?" No answer. He walked further into the house, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. He passed through opulent rooms, filled with antique furniture and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. He felt a growing sense of unease. Then he saw it, a figure standing in the shadows at the end of the hall. He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. It was a man, tall, imposing. His face was hidden in shadow. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure stepped forward, emerging into the light. Ethan gasped. It was him, Frederick Douglass, but not the spectral figure from the hospital. This Douglass was solid, real, human. "Hello, Ethan," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Welcome home." He smiled. Then Ethan saw it. The eyes. They weren't burning blue. They were brown, warm, familiar. "Dad?" he breathed, his mind reeling. Douglas stepped closer, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It's time you knew the truth, son. All of it. About me, about your mother, about this family, and what I truly intend to do." Ethan stared at the man. "I'm not Frederick Douglass," he said, a glint in his eye. Then he smiled. "I'm not Frederick Douglass," he said, a glint in his eye. Then he smiled. Ethan stared, dumbfounded. What are you saying? You're not my father?" The man chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that somehow made Ethan's blood run colder. "Oh, I'm your father all right, son. Just not that Frederick Douglass." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, flipping it open to reveal a worn ID card. "John Sterling," Ethan read aloud, his voice trembling. "John Sterling? My uncle?" John smiled sadly. "Your Uncle John, yes. The one your grandmother disowned. The one she sent away because he was an embarrassment." He paused, his eyes hardening. "Because he was a black man." The truth slammed into Ethan like a physical blow. The years of lies, the twisted family history, it all unraveled before his eyes. But the ghost? The spectral figure? In the hospital? Ethan stammered, trying to make sense of it all. John shook his head. "Tricks, Ethan. Illusions. I learned a few things in my life, living in the shadows. I knew someone would try to stop us from uncovering the truth." "Us?" Ethan repeated, his mind still reeling. "You and Agent Carter?" John nodded. "Sarah's sister, yes. We've been working together for years, piecing this puzzle together. She knew Sarah was in danger. But something felt wrong. Something wasn't adding up. If you aren't Frederick, then who set the whole thing in motion? The money, the slaves, the killings?" John's face fell. An expression of pain crossed his face. "That was him, son. That was Charles. But Charles was just a pawn. He wasn't working alone." He paused, looking over Ethan's shoulder. A loud thud. Ethan turned to see Agent Carter's body hitting the floor. Lying on top of her, covered in blood, was Alex, and standing next to them was Charles. Charles winked at John, and as he did, John lunged at Ethan, his face contorted in a rage. "You ruined everything," he screamed. "I was so close. I had it all." Ethan stumbled backwards, confusion warring with horror. "You? But why?" John's eyes gleamed with a chilling intensity. "Because I deserve it. I was the one who was cast aside, the one who was deemed unworthy. I deserve the Sterling fortune, not you." He pulled a knife from his boot, the blade glinting in the dim light. Ethan backed away, his heart pounding in his chest. "You won't get away with this," Ethan cried, the knife just inches from his face. John laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "I already have, Ethan. By the time the police get here, you'll be dead, and I'll be long gone." He lunged, the knife aimed at Ethan's heart. Suddenly, a shot rang out. John gasped, clutching his chest. He stumbled backwards, his eyes wide with disbelief. He fell to the floor, dead. Ethan turned, his breath catching in his throat. Standing in the doorway, gun still smoking, was Alex. Alex dropped the gun, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Ethan, his small body trembling. I didn't mean to," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Then he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Ethan rushed to his side, his heart breaking. Alex. Killer? It couldn't be. But as he looked at the boy's face, he saw something in his features. Something familiar. Something sinister. He remembered the spectral Douglas in the hospital. The cold blue eyes. The chilling voice. And then it hit him. It wasn't Frederick Douglass who had possessed Eleanor. It was someone else. Someone far more powerful. Someone far more dangerous. And he had just found its new vessel. "Oh God, no," he whispered, his voice filled with dread. Then Alex's eyes snapped open. Alex's eyes snapped open. They weren't blue anymore, not even brown. They were empty. Just black pools swallowing the light. A grin stretched across his face, too wide, too unnatural. "Did you really think you could stop me, Ethan?" The voice wasn't Alex's. It was deeper, colder, laced with ancient malice. "I've been waiting, patiently, for generations, using that pathetic Douglas as a stepping stone." Ethan scrambled back, the truth crashing down on him. The ledgers, the slaves, the murders. It wasn't about revenge. It was about power. This thing had been feeding on the Sterling family's darkness for centuries, growing stronger with each act of cruelty. "You can't win," Ethan choked out, but even he didn't believe it. The creature wearing Alex's body chuckled. "Oh, I already have. The Sterling. Blood flows strong in this one. He's perfect." It raised its hand, and Ethan felt a crushing weight on his chest, a suffocating darkness creeping into his soul. He gasped for air, his vision blurring, but then a flicker of blue, a tiny spark of defiance. Alex's real self, trapped inside, fighting back. The black eyes flickered, replaced for a fleeting second by Alex's terrified blue. He whispered, a strangled sound, lost in the creature's malevolent glee. "Music box." Ethan understood. He had to destroy the source of its power. The music box. He lunged forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the darkness closing in. He grabbed the music box from John's lifeless hand and threw it against the wall. It shattered, the delicate melody of Claire de Lune cut short. The creature screamed, a sound that ripped through the air, and the black eyes vanished. Alex slumped to the floor, unconscious again. The weight on Ethan's chest lifted. He could breathe again. But he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He looked down at Alex, his great-nephew, his responsibility. The kid was still alive, beaten, battered, but alive. He had a chance. They all did. He didn't know what the future held. More secrets, more lies, more ghosts. But he knew one thing. He wouldn't let this darkness win. He owed it to Sarah, to Frederick, to his real family. He picked up Alex, cradling him in his arms. The kid stirs. Ethan sees the flash of recognition, a question, a need. He'll be ready. They both will. Outside, the sirens wailed. The city lights twinkled, oblivious to the darkness lurking beneath the surface. But Ethan knew it was still there, waiting, watching, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would be back. You saw that ending, right? You felt the chills, the questions. You cannot let this story end here. So listen up, because this is important. You need to subscribe right now. Don't even think about clicking away. The next chapter, the real answers, they're coming soon, but only if you're subscribed. Smeg that like button now. Show the algorithm you're here for the real stuff. This is the moment to demonstrate your support. Flood the comments with your reactions. Theories? Predictions? I want to see them all. Tell me what you think is going to happen next. Share this video with at least 5 friends. They need to see this. Don't wait nem más segundo. Let's get this story out there. Only the true fans understand what's at stake. Show your support now.